Fellow Equatorians, this is Sabata with the Equatorial Advocacy Foundation. I would like to very quickly share with you my opinion on where I think we the Equatorians are making a very big mistake. And this is just going to be part one. I'm going to add part two. Now, I'm running this under the Equatorial Advocacy Foundation. Now, I think where we are going wrong, fellow Equatorians, is when we try to identify ourselves with the identity of Equatoria, with the identity of South Sudan more than Equatoria. You see, I made a lot of videos, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel of Equatorial Advocacy Foundation so that you will see some of the videos that I talked about how Equatorians evolved, all right, and how you came to existence and how you got amalgamated into what is called South Sudan. I gave a history of all those with verifications that you can also double check in Google. You see, identity is very important. If you don't love yourself, if you don't love your identity, you can easily be erased if you don't hold onto your identity or if you don't understand your identity very well. See, there are so many talks, even in from an historical account about the history of Equatoria being created by Samuel Baker and whatnot. Here is the thing about that account. That account does not give you a very clear geographical territory. There is no regional boundary, all right? When Samuel Baker talked about Equatoria or created what is called an Equatoria, it was just pretty much a direction. It is referred to as Equatoria Basin. Basin is so many latitudes west and east of the Nile, all right? And then so many longitudes north and south of the equator line was defined as the equatorial territory or the equatorial basin at the time. But that was just a direction. Fellow Equatorians, you should not be confused by people's accounts trying to define you who you are. No, you should learn who you are by yourself. Make your research very well. You will find out that Equatoria, with a clear geographical drawing, with a very clear geographical drawing, was initiated in 1894 when a territorial boundary, when a regional boundary was drawn and then called the Laduk Kingdom, all right, and then leased off to Leopold II, who was running Congo Free State in 1894, because that territorial boundary ended up being the current Equatoria of the geographical territory of the 1956. It is that territory. So it started in 1894. So when we talk about Equatoria map, it started in 1894. It is that territory which was called Ladu Kingdom, which was given out to Leopold, and then Leopold named it the Ladu Enclave, and then Leopold ran it under a territory or under what is called the Congolese Free State. Now that deal happened in 1894, and you can imagine 5 years later than that, when the British formed what was called condominium, the British and the Egyptian formed what was called condominium in Sudan. Equatorians, you are not part of that. You do not have any historical account that that you were being run under the condominium regime that was established from 1899, because you were administered under the Congolese Free State by this gentleman who was called Leopold. He was called King Leopold II until 1906. Then the agreement of 1894, the Congolese Free Trade Treaty of 1894, was then nullified. They amended it in 1906 British and the Belgians came and entered into an agreement because Leopold lost authority of that place, and that place was handed over to the Belgians. All right. And because that authority was handed over to the Belgians, so now British then came and nullified that contract that they have had with Leopold and entered into this deal with the Belgians in 1906. But then when Leopold died in 1910, when British took authority of this territory, as the British were taking that territory, they were already in the middle of what is called condominium. All right, 1910, imagine, 1910, that was when the British and the Egyptians were running Sudan at the time. All right, now it was only that time that now that territory was administratively now retrieved from the Belgians, and then the British took over the authority of that place and administered you separate, did not annex you directly under the administration of Sudan, that is under governorship of Sudan, because they appointed a separate governor, a person by the name of Arthur Witherhead, to administer your affairs. All right. So even though the English and the Egyptians at that time were still ruling Sudan, but they appointed a separate governor in your territory, and you maintained that your identity remained separate. And when the British retrieved you from under the Belgians, first you were called Mangala, and your capital was actually Mangala. And then from there, your name was changed into the Equatoria, okay? And then from there, the southern territory of your map was redrawn because it extended up all the way to Pakwach in the current Uganda, but then it was redrawn to the 1956 borders, all right? And that is how your territory of the Equatoria came to be, all right? And all throughout that time, the tribes of Equatoria did not know much about yourselves. Even though all those political arrangements were going around you, the tribes themselves did not know much about themselves. When you come to the Eastern Equatorial tribes and you talk to them about the people of Western Equatoria or Central Equatoria, they did not know much about that, because the political agreements happened around you by what is called people who were colonials at the time. So clearly, fellow Equatorians, your identity is not South Sudan. Don't hold to that identity so much, because that identity is now the cause of your ethnic cleansing that is going on. And I will connect this maybe in the second part of this. I'm going to do a video too, because right now, as you continue to hold the identity of South Sudan so much, you are ethnically getting cleansed under this identity. But then I will come to it later. I'm trying to tell you to hold to your identity as Equatorians first. And why am I saying you should hold your identity as Equatorians first? Because when now you have been retrieved under the British and you are called Mangala, and then later on then called Equatoria, you remained as the Equatorial province, okay, that was administered by the Anglo-Egyptians, but not part of Sudan yet. Not part of Sudan yet. Until after the First World War, ended up in 1919, and I have to mention this, the British actually, due to so many tribal fights, then there was an agreement that was reached, all right? Arthur Witherhead signed the agreement with the chief of Lugora tribe at that time, because the chief of Lugora tribe led an alliance with the people of the Aringa, the people of the Kakua. They reached into an agreement that Equatoria was going to be given, you people were going to be given what is called independence in 1960. But the British didn't want to just take their protectorate out from you people, because the tribes did not know much about themselves. If the British were just to remove their protectorate over you, then there will be no nation of Equatoria actually, because the eastern tribes don't know the central tribes. and the Western tribes, don't know the Eastern tribes. You see, but what the British did was they really wanted to form that nation. They came up with with programs. All right, the Christian Missionary Society built a lot of schools. Catholic mission came in, built a lot of schools. The Equatorial COP program for building what is called the Equatorial Defense Force, where so many people from different tribes were taken and then formed into what is called the Equatorial COP. There was a program of putting you into nation, all right, institutionalizing you as Equatorians, not as South Sudanese. Please, Equatorians, as Equatorians, not as South Sudanese. Because every time you keep tying South Sudan in your mind, you are shooting yourself on the legs. Because right now there is no cooperation within Sudan. There is what is called politics of domination, and it is you who are suffering it. Please don't hold into that identity of South Sudan so much. And I'm coming one by one to it. Cling to it, but not that much. All right? But hold yourself as Equatorians first. All right? But then, here's the thing. When the World War broke in 1914 and the British became so busy with the fight of the First World War, and the World War ended in 1919, British plans changed for forming you into a nation, so that then they will form what is called a state. Hakuma, bitat the Equatoria, and then give you the independence. Zeumon can plan gal independence, they will be given in 1960. No, they changed their plans. And when they changed their plan in 1920, this is now when they came and instituted what was called the South. And how did they do it? They came with the plan that Haj Al-Gina did, the closed districts. You know, when you hear about the closed districts, you can also call it the inclusion policy or the close proximity policy. When you use all those terms, they mean the same thing. It means the closed district policy. So in the closed district policy, what really happened is the same British who were also running Sudan under the condominium. What they did was they administratively detached the North and these people who ended up being formed under what is called the province of the Upper Nile, and these tribes that were formed under the province of Bahr al-Ghazal, they were administratively detached from the North, and no any northerner would come to these guys unless they get a permit from a local administrative office that were run by the Egyptian under the British. And at that time, the Egyptians were also preparing to leave, because the British wanted them to leave Sudan because they were wrapping up, because eventually British was going to give Sudan an independence also. So the Egyptians were also planning to leave, because in 1924 they ended up leaving, and it was only the British who were left in Sudan. But then the closed district policy restricted movements of northerners into these territories that what formerly called the province of Upper Nile and the province of Bahr al-Ghazal. And I wish the people of Upper Nile and the people of Bahr al-Ghazal will make more research to come and understand when their regional territories were drawn into a map. When did that happen? And how? Why? You see, I have explained how the regional territory of Equatoria came to exist starting from 1894, when that territory was leased out to Leopold. That was the beginning of everything. It was the beginning of drawing a map without what is currently called Equatoria, because it was called the Lado Enclave. It was called the Lado Kingdom. Then Leopold changed it into Lado Enclave, because after he leased it, he looked at it as though it was his enclave. All right, and then later on, British took it back, called it Mangala, and then later changed the name into Equatoria. This is the existing Equatoria. So now, let the people of Upper Nile and the people of Bahr al-Ghazal make their own research to understand exactly when did that province Bitat, Upper Nile and Bitat Equatoria came to be drawn, and what was the politics around it. Because what I want to tell you, Equatorians, is it was only between the 1920 to the 1922 closed district policy that was when administratively this former province of Upper Nile and former province of Bahr al-Ghazal were administratively detached from the North, and then opened up into the Equatoria. Okay, opened up into the Equatoria, so that there will be institutionalization of those people. But you got to remember, these things are done administratively, even though these tribes did not even institutionalize, did not even intermarry. They don't know themselves that much. You see? So you can imagine, and this is the process of now South Sudan being formed. Now here is the challenge, Equatorians. Now this is how South Sudan was formed. All right? And you tribes bit at Equatoria, you are a melting pot. You are understanding each other very well. But it looks like Lahadi Hassare, you are not able to understand each other very well with the other tribes bit at the former province of Upper Nile and Bahar al-Ghazal. Why now do you want to hold the South Sudan Fibor Bitahon? Why? Why do you want to hold South Sudan as though it is your identity, and yet you are not even getting well with those tribes? You did not produce South Sudan. You only got well as Equatorians. But there is challenge as you are now getting institutionalized into what is called South Sudan as people, as a nation. There is a challenge, fellow Equatorians. Maybe with the youth right now, it's going well. But let me tell you something. There has been a challenge, and let me provide the evidence. The evidence is this. Some people will try to say, oh, how about when the Anyanya one was fought, these people were kind of together. Yes, they were together because there was a common interest. And the politicians, what was called the leaders, came together because they had what is called a political agenda. And they found themselves, they had to come together. It is just like they are forming alliance. Right? Okay, that is why they fought together in Anyanya 1. But now here is a very good evidence here. Now, when government of the Addis Ababa was reached as a settlement of the fight between Anyanya 1, okay, Muskoinu government of 1972, that is of the Addis Ababa agreement. What then happened is South Sudanese were not able to get along. Do you guys remember when you guys had that parliament, the People's Regional Assembly, Fidakhil, Juba, and that was the only parliament you had? It was nicknamed Parliament Lagu when Lagu was the president of the High Executive Council. Okay? Now, when Abel Alier came for the second term as a leader of that regional autonomy in 1980, do you remember the incidences that were taking place during those days? If you don't remember, I encourage you to read. There is a pamphlet that Lagu wrote. It is Decentralization, Necessity for the Southern Region. Okay? He wrote that pamphlet, he narrated all the problems. There was nepotism, tribalism, there were fights, even in schools but Marat Bigofuru, along tribal lines. And that is an evidence that itu Gabail Bitat Equatoria, you are not melting well. And it was because of that, then Lagu also proposed the idea of coming up with what is called this Kokora idea that dividing the regions. Because at that time, I want you to remember that in 1980 there was an act that Nimeri came up with that he kind of formed what is called regional governments. In the north, you had what is called the Kordofan region, Darfur, I think central and northern region. You see, he created some regional, administrative function. But then with the south, nothing was done. South remained as is. But that idea was actually being bought in Lagu and his group, and they said no, that same idea should be implemented hatta fi South, and it was the idea of Kokora, which later on Nimeri bought into it and declared the Kokora. That is why he divided that regional autonomy, Hakuma Bitana Bita Junub, Al-Kanindu Parliament Wahid fi Juba Henagde. Then he formed he divided the three provinces. Musgibela na kelim later gali akhi Junub Sudan de Turkey bitat Talata bitat Equatoria, the former Upper Nile province and the former Bahar al-Ghazal province. Okay? These three provinces constituted what is called South, with people of different characteristics. These three provinces formed what is called South. And from the time of independence, these three provinces, each province was divided into, these three regions, each region was divided into 2 provinces. So we ended up having about 6 provinces in the South. Now, fellow brothers, what I'm trying to tell you is you should realize this, that in 1980, when Naslagos bought the idea about dividing the regions, Nimeri declared it, and this is what we had, what is called Kokora. And why was it? That was because we were not getting along. We were not getting along, fellow Equatorians. We are not getting along culturally. Don't insist. Don't insist, Kana Jaltaya Halabu South Sudan. No. You are trying to fit in South Sudan, but it is to your detriment. Because it is right now, it is your tribes that are getting extinct. It is your tribes, Equatorial tribes, that are now fleeing the equatorial area and going to East Africa. You see that? You go and ask the Kakwa and Kaya. Go and ask the Madi Nimule. It is to your detriment. Why do you want to hold to something that is really damaging you? And by the way, you should have actually appreciated Nimeri when he declared this Kokora, when he gave you your region, Equatorial region, under governorship with that Lago. You had your own Barlamanta Lago. They ended up there as your Barlaman. That 6-month period of time, you enjoyed it. Bahar Ghazal was also under their own governor. They had their own assembly. They had their own police. Upper Nile, the same thing. They had their own governor, they had their own assembly, they had their own police system. You Equatorians, the same. Fikokora, you enjoyed this 6 months. You should have said Alhamdulillah Nimeri. But I want you to realize this. Then when SPLM broke out, which I suspect actually the reasons for which SPLM was initiated, this is because the people who were having a good time in Zaman Bitat regional autonomy felt that the divisions took them Femanatic Bitown. Lakin, what was wrong with that? Yani, kan galiahi ro again if Mantika Bitak, have your own governor, have your own assembly, police your own community. Is there anything wrong with that? Does that warrant an assassin you should go and support a revolution? It looks to me like that revolution was initiated. Revolution at SPLM, the second revolution, was initiated simply. It's actually a direct result of the Kokora. The people who initiated it did not like the idea of the Kokora. They just want to come and hang around the Equatorians. But the problem is when they come and hang around the Equatorians, they give you a hard time. All right? So they initiated the second civil war. Equatorians know this very well. The second civil war was initiated, then you ended up getting lewd. Kapasitahon. Galiaki, oh, nas nimeri, hakumata sorat mayode, mustamerin, delgistamerunas. You also picked up guns. You went, asagi kengali, you did not fight. Asagi kengali, asa, fi policies, I'll get abugude agi kutita hongi leave the country, ufinas minta hunlisa, you hold nefsa to mangaluma nekoto. Umon South Sudanese more than Equatorians. Really? No, Equatorians, think carefully. Think carefully. Hold yourself an Equatorian. Hakuma betakon kanyamdak under regional autonomy udileta hunkokorade. You enjoyed security. You enjoyed economic progress. You enjoyed a number of things. It was distracted. My SPLM fight. Netija to SPLM fight gal jable konchino. Oh, Jablena Junub, Kana Jalanna Gakul Junub, Anna Magakulu territory, Anna Gakulu system, Alanna Gigenimo. We live well. Beteriga betat, Afkar bitana, hospitality bitana. Musubes is in Junub territory bita Junub, and yet halatawari kan gidoru fi equatorial area nak itu nasta istiwaya ita onge anda bulu fi jueta onzaro magerta la bara out of fear. Gabail tahun kalas tanini abi gira halu gi migrate gira fi East Africa. What Junub are you talking about? Did you guys suffer that kind of consequences? Fi zaman takokora? Now, Equatorians, I want you to realize something. So basically, what SPLM did, tool SPLM, the uprising, what it did was, it basically took power, okay, because during the regional autonomy, zaman beta hakuma beta 1972, power was balanced. Power was balanced at that time. And when you were about to be dominated, at that time, uncles, people like those of Lagu, all right, and some politicians around camps, bitat Nas Lagu, Nas Elioba Surur, Nas Ajodedi, they all say, no. This politics, bitat domination over Equatorians will not work. At that time, they were protecting you. You are the children. They wanted to make sure you are not getting dominated. That is why they said, no, we will have to divide these regions. Aizol badde kedahkim nefsu. Ashan badda kaman hakuma bitat region bitat Equatoria de algi kowino and the governorship bitat Equatoria de kan kowino kan fi aizol tane jay min ala Nilu ala min Bahar al-Ghazal aju settle fi Equatoria bija be settle under our terms. Under our teriga alanna constitute more government. Idara biyam shikef. So that our children will not be dominated. Don't confuse domination and participating in what is called being part of a society. If you are dominated, Equatorians, you suffer the way you are suffering right now in equatorial areas. You are not. You are dominated, actually. Equatorians, you are dominated, and as time goes, it's going to be worse. It's going to get worse. I'm sending this message to you because I want to tell you to unwrap, reorient yourself out from what is called South Sudan, and then hold to Equatoria and clasp your fist like that. I'll come back again and we will discuss in part 2 a continuation of this, and I will continue poking in the same line. Lahad yom sharta kan kita la grey kullu. If Equatorians decide not to listen to this so that they act right, yomal kanuma ligona satomon kulu biga fi Uganda or fi Kenya assimilating into the Nubi community, you will remember this video. Thank you very much. God bless you. We'll meet again in part 2. Equatoria, where you are going wrong. Please, let's correct that. And by the way, call me. My number is 801-674-3851. We have a team. We are working on something that will eventually relieve Equatorians as time go by. We are working on our unity as Equatorians. Call. Let us work together. Let us put our arms together, because eventually we will draw a vision that will eventually lead us to a permanent freedom bitana bita Equatoria. Thank you very much. God bless you.